You study and write about history of ideas in the United States over the past 100 years, 100 plus years. Well, how do you think ideas evolve and gain power over the populace, over our government, over culture? Just looking at evolution of ideas as they dance and challenge each other and play in public discourse. What do you think is the mechanism by which they take hold and have influence?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple different ways I think it happens. I really am interested in the relationship between the thinker and then the reader and the interpreter of the ideas, and then the conditions on the ground that make that idea resonate or not resonate. Um, and so I think a lot. So as an intellectual historian, I'm studying ideas, and I'm always putting them in their historical context. Like, what is happening that is making these things resonate? That is making them people seek them out. So for Rand's case, she has this credibility because of her experience of communism, which is one of these defining moments of the time. And then I think the idea comes out in a sort of pure form, and then other people rework it and reshape it as they read it. And I'm really interested in how people form communities around these ideas. So a bunch of people started calling themselves objectivists and getting together to read Rand's work. That was spontaneous and ground up and wasn't supported by any money. Nobody planned it. It just happened. Friedman's a different case in that he joins an established tradition of thought that's been institutionalized in universities. So people are signing up and paying money and getting credentialed to learn these ideas. So to my mind, these are two different ways, but really emblematic ways of how ideas spread. So Rand, I think of as more bottom up, like people encounter the idea in a book. They're kind of blown away by it, or they imbibe it without even realizing they're imbibing it. And then they're like, well, maybe I don't like Franklin Roosevelt so much, or maybe I'll look another time at Barry Goldwater. And then whereas Friedman, you get the idea more top down. I know I'm getting the idea. I know I'm being positioned within a sort of elite discourse of economics. And so I think they kind of go top down and bottom up, and then they hit the events, right? Friedman's ideas wouldn't have gone anywhere without that episode of stagflation that really made people think they proved out. And I think Rand's ideas really caught fire in Cold War America that's looking for a statement of like, what does it mean to be an individual? What does it mean to live in this mass society? Because it's also a time of great social conformity and where people are suddenly, they're working for large corporations. They've been served in a large military. The United States is stepping out onto the world stage. Everything is bigger. What does it mean to be an individual in that world? And that's where Rand's ideas catch fire. So I think a lot about that, about how they trickle through different levels of society, and then how ideas collide with experience, I think is critical.
What do you think about like when they actually take power in government? So I think about ideas like Marxism and how that evolves into the Bolshevik Revolution, and how that like takes hold in its implementations. Or you can think about Nazism and with Hitler, where it goes from a small number of people that get real excited about a thing, and then like somehow it just becomes viral and takes hold in power, and then that has its consequences.
When I think about this sort of historical path of communism and the kind of logics and dynamics of communism, I mean, in many ways, it has some echoes with Rand in that, the ideology in its purest form is almost it's a rationalist ideology of some ways. It's an analysis of history and how things are supposed to be. And I think you mentioned Hannah Arendt. I think she has one of the most kind of penetrating analyses of communism, which she really puts in the category of like it's a logical ideology. Logic leads inexorably to its conclusions, and then experience crops up, and experience is different. And what is a sort of cult of rationality do when it hits experience? Well, it tries to bend experience to its will. And that, I think, is really the story of communism writ large. So the question, though, is why does it catch fire? Why does it draw people into political allegiance? I think in the case of communism, it's this dream of a more ethical world, dream of equality, dream of the powerless rising up against the powerful. I mean, that's very, that's drawn in so many. And then you had the whole addition of Leninism, which gave a kind of international cast to that and helped people think about what are the relations between poorer and richer countries and what can we expect out of them and what might happen, gave a sort of a framework for thinking about that in a time when the world was becoming more interconnected and those differences were becoming more obvious. Fascism to me is unleashing more something primal, something sort of dark and primal within people. And it's more a permission structure to indulge in that is normally not there. Those impulses are normally channeled or held down. And it seems that when the fascist regimes come into power, they give people permission to let those forces out.
I think on communism, going back to that lecture that Ayn Rand gave, I think what rings true to me a little bit is that what fuels it is a kind of maybe not resentment, but envy towards the people that have the have-nots versus the haves. And there's some degree to which Nazism has the same of envy towards some group, resentment towards some group. So it's given the environment of hard times, hard economic times, combined with the more primal just envy of not having and seeing somebody who has it and just constructing a narrative around that can become a real viral idea.
Yeah, it seems like communism is more animated by this idea of injustice. The world is unjust. It should be different. And fascism seems like the process of scapegoating, right? We've identified the source of the problem, and it's this group. And they need to be punished for what they've done to the rest of us.
There is a primal thing, going back to literature, 1984, 2 Minutes of Hate, where you can get everybody real excited about hating a thing. And there's something primal about us humans where once you're in that state of hate, anyone can direct that hate towards anything.
Yeah.
Towards any group, towards any idea, towards anything. Just because we could get caught up in the mass hysteria of the hatred. It's a dangerous thing.
Yeah.